This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zalman and Storman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law. Welcome to Law Line with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Law Line will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now we introduce our guest and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Law Line. A recent poll by the National Law Journal showed an increase in the public cynicism towards lawyers. The legal profession is facing a serious image crisis, which is enhanced by the popularity of lawyer-bashing jokes on television and in the movies. Today we'll look at the results of that poll with Doreen Wiesenhaus, editor-in-chief of the National Law Journal, and Stephen Peskin, president of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. Hello, Doreen. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Alan.
Doreen, tell us, what did this poll about public's opinion on lawyers, what did it show?
Well, it showed that over 70% of the American population feels that there are far too many lawyers in America today, and that is up dramatically over the last time we took a poll in 1986. We also found that double the number of people think that lawyers are less honest than other people in other professions, and probably the most telling was that only 5% of the parents said that they would want their child to go into the legal profession.
Stephen, you're president of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, probably one of the largest trial lawyers associations in the United States. How do you answer that?
It's very simple, Alan. This poll was taken of people discussing lawyers of all sizes and shapes. The commercial lawyers, the banking lawyers, the lawyers that defend insurance companies, the lawyers that defend the drug manufacturers, the lawyers that charge by the hour. I represent, and I'm proud to represent, over 7,000 lawyers in New York State who represent the personal injury plaintiffs' bar. We don't get paid by the hour. We get paid on a contingency fee. And that is the equalizer in our system of justice. That's the key to the courthouse for the average person. If I were injured today in an automobile accident, I couldn't afford to pay me if I had to pay me by the hour. It would be prohibitive, the costs.
Doreen, what Stephen is saying regarding the personal injury lawyer, did you find that in your survey?
Well, there is some validity to that. What they felt was that their frustration of lawyers, that they didn't have access to those lawyers. And someone who will help them in a personal injury case, that will help them. But one of the big problems that people have is that when they're dealing with lawyers, it's usually for some bad incident that happened in their life. They've been injured, they're going through a divorce, it's a nasty custody battle, or they're going through bankruptcy. So sometimes they kind of put on these negative feelings that they have about the incidents that they're going through on the lawyer who's representing them.
Of course, that has nothing to do with the lawyer's competence or otherwise. No. That has to do with that that's like killing the messenger because the messenger gives you a bad note.
Well, let's be fair about this, Doreen. I think your study and the ABA study that was done almost simultaneously with your newspaper study said that the question of competency really wasn't the issue that was being raised by the American public. They felt that lawyers were generally competent, and they were pleased about that competency rating.
They loved their own lawyers, but they hated the fact that they had to hire a lawyer to begin with. That was their frustration, because what we found is that the number of people who are using lawyers today is far greater than it used to be. 7 out of 10 of Americans have had some contact with lawyers. The ABA, the American Bar Association survey showed that 1 out of 6 have been sued themselves. 1 out of 5 have brought lawsuits, and that's what their frustration. They aren't blaming the messenger.
Well, we're a litigious society. There's no question about that. But that is part of the American background. More importantly is not the negatives that your poll showed and that the ABA poll showed, but some of the positives. What were the groups of people that felt their lawyers were good and liked lawyers and appreciated what the lawyers were doing, that the lawyers were the backbone of society and the deliverer of the good that our country has to give? They looked at women, tend to favor it, minority groups, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, children and young people under 30 years of age, poor people, people in family incomes of less than $20,000 a year. These are the people who utilize the legal system to help make them whole when they're injured or to help defend them when they're wrongly accused of a crime.
Doreen, may I ask you this? William Shakespeare, in his famous line, said, "Kill all the lawyers."
No, 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 Alan, I'm going to stop you there, because if you were a classical literature,
my show.
if you were a classical literature scholar, you will know that the quote was not that, but that the protagonist in that particular show wanted to take over the kingdom, and his henchmen, when told by the protagonist, "I'll take over the kingdom and this can all be ours, we don't have to do the bidding of the king," the henchman said, "Before you can take over the kingdom, you will have to first kill all the lawyers."
I see.
Why? Because the lawyers are those that protect the people. The lawyers are the champions of the people. And if you're going to do something wrong, you're going to have to kill the champions of the people first.
Aha, so that's a different interpretation, Doreen.
This goes to the heart of why the image of lawyers have plummeted over time. When lawyers were the defenders of the innocent, the defenders of your rights, people had a very good attitude. It's where this shift has been. A lot of it happened during the 80s when lawyers seemed to be more motivated by how much money that they were going to get, by their hourly fees, that attitudes toward them began to change.
Doreen, that's where the difference is between the trial lawyers of New York State and the other lawyers. We don't charge by the hour. We charge on a contingency fee. That is a percentage of what we recover for an injured person. Now,
What percentage, Steve, are trial lawyers of all lawyers in the country or even in this city? They're not the majority, and if you're looking for reasons why people have these negative attitudes, that I think may explain.
well,
part
I
of
think
it.
one of the reasons that people have the negative attitude is who is the messenger of those negative attitudes. You have the drug manufacturers, you have the product manufacturers, you have the medical health care industry, who have been called to task not by the Federal Drug Administration, not by the Consumer Product Safety Commission in the 1980s that was decimated by the Reagan administration so that there was really no consumer advocates out there. It's the lawyers, the consumer advocates for the people that brought them to their knees.
How do you feel Watergate, where you had the top lawyers of the United States being indicted, actually going to prison, had an effect on the public's attitude?
I think it had a major effect. Scott Turow was recently quoted, a well-known lawyer, author, who has written a lot about the role of lawyers in his novels that have been very popular. And he says Watergate was a turning point in the public's perception about, here they thought lawyers at one time had been considered these defenders of your rights, and now they were doing all these dastardly deeds. They were helping to bring down a country, and I think that definitely was a turning point.
Steve, what do you think about this lawyer advertising? You talk about personal injury lawyers. Nowadays, you cannot watch a daytime show without at least one attorney getting on and asking you if you're injured, call that particular attorney.
Lawyer advertising came into existence after the United States Supreme Court said that it was acceptable.
I understand that. What effect do you have on the public?
I think it's having a deleterious effect. I am not an advertiser myself, but a large percentage of my association members are advertisers in some way, shape, or form. I think the public has a right to know who lawyers are and what services they have to offer. Advertising is one median of doing it. I believe there has to be some controls. In some states, the lawyer advertising on television especially has become unseemly. It is not that bad in New York State yet. I think the good taste of the members of the profession are prevailing, and I think they know what the New York market will do. But I've seen advertising in other parts of the country, and there's a concern. I believe your statistics and the ABA statistics says that people are upset by the lawyers that advertise on TV. But if I need a lawyer, and I've never had a lawyer before, everyone has a doctor. Everyone knows who the family doctor is, but you usually don't need a lawyer, as Doreen said, until you have a crisis. Well, the Yellow Pages certainly offers a modality to find a lawyer.
Doreen, I know, yes?
Yeah, but I'm saying people don't get their lawyers from advertising. That was one of the questions that we asked. How do you get your lawyer? Only like 12% got their lawyers from advertising.
How did they get their lawyer?
The vast majority was through a friend, an acquaintance, a family member.
A
It was
referral.
through referrals.
Of course, that's the best way.
Through satisfied customers. People said, gee, who's the lawyer that helped you out on
You're
your
in the
divorce?
media, and well, how do you feel about this limiting advertising? What's your personal feeling?
Well, the feeling is that if you look at the public's attitude is that they think that advertising is unseemly For us, I mean, as a defender of the First Amendment, I think you should have advertising. I think that you shouldn't have any of these kinds of restrictions. But we have different interests in the media. I'm a former practicing lawyer. If I was a lawyer today and practicing, what would I be doing? I probably wouldn't be advertising because it wouldn't really be helping. It would be giving a negative image to what my services are. I would rather have someone come to me because they heard through someone else, through a satisfied client, that I gave good services for that person. In
Let me ask you
this
this one second, please, Steve. There are 60,000 lawyers practicing right here in the metropolitan New York area. How are you going to stand out? How are you going to get your message across to those 7, 8, 10 million people who are out there that you're available and that you practice in this particular area if it's not for advertising?
That's a dilemma. That is totally a dilemma, and I don't know what the easy answer is to that.
Well, there's another side to that picture, though, because the public has a right to be educated on their rights. And sometimes not every lawyer can do that. And through an advertisement, it can be done.
So you're in favor of advertising?
Well, I'm in favor of advertising that is done in a professional and wholesome manner.
Who's to determine what's professional and wholesome?
Well, the American Bar Association wants to determine that. That's one of, they have like a 6-point plan in which they're going to spend $700,000 in trying to improve the image of the profession. They're going to start having these seminars around the country trying to teach lawyers, how can I better serve my client? Return phone calls is going to be one of their messages. And another part of their plan is trying to come up with guidelines as to what is tasteful advertising, what is advertising that won't be offensive to the public, yet will give the kind of information that Steve was talking about, information that might be valuable for someone in trying to decide what kind of attorney I want to hire.
What about the media's position regarding lawyers? You turn on Saturday Night Live and they're doing a whole skit, a negative skit on attorneys. You watch Jurassic Park where when the attorney who is sitting in an outhouse gets eaten, everybody applauds.
Yes.
I mean, what's going on here?
And that has been another change, but it's mirrored what's happened in the public. It used to be when the media was doing stories on Perry Mason. Perry Mason was really very popular 20 years ago.
They wanted their children to be lawyers.
They wanted their children to be lawyers. But now, because the media, particularly in entertainment, follows the taste of the public, if the public doesn't like lawyers, the media doesn't like lawyers in terms of its entertainment. They want people to cheer at their movies. They want people to buy books. They want people to do, to follow these particular images. And so they're going to go with it.
Stephen, you're president of the trial lawyers. What are you doing to change the public's image, as Doreen says it is?
We're getting our message out to the public through various consumer groups who know the work that we're doing. If it wasn't for a lawyer, the Ford Motor Company would have still been making Pinto automobiles. I just had occasion, Alan, just yesterday, to review what they call a smoking gun document that was produced at the Pinto trial. That goes back 20 years now. They did an analysis, Ford Motor Company, and they said, well, there are a certain number of people that are being burned horribly or killed as a result of the misplaced gas tank. It would cost us $49 million to pay these people the benefits that they're entitled to. If we were to retool and recall all of the Ford Pintos, it would cost $149 million. They did an analysis of that. They did a cost analysis to determine whether or not they were going to save lives or bury it. What it took a trial lawyer to ferret that out, to dig it out, and to expose it. The same thing with asbestos. We're reading about asbestos all over the world now.
Steve, you have to hold that. We have to go to a break now, but right after the break, Doreen, I'm going to ask you, what's the public's perception about the influence, the power that lawyers have?
Okay.
You're watching Lawline. Stay with us. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host.
After dating the guy forever, you think I could tell him anything. Why is this so hard? I'm really scared.
It takes a lot of guts to tell someone he's too drunk to drive. But you can do it. Just say it. Because if you don't, there may be nothing left to say.
Kevin, I'm gonna drive.
Take the keys, call a cab, take a stand. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
When your employees train with the National Guard and Reserve, they learn to be better team players, better decision makers, and better leaders. It's training that makes them better at serving our country. And better when they come back to work for you.
Bill's back.
Be a hero. Give your employees the freedom to protect ours.
Hello, I'm Alan Schnorman. You're watching Lawline. Today we're talking about lawyers and their public image. How does it sound? How does it seem to the public? The National Law Journal just had a whole survey on what you think about lawyers, and now we're learning about it. Today our guests are Doreen Weisenhaus, Editor-in-Chief of the National Law Journal, and Stephen Peskin, President of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. Doreen, before the break I had asked you, what is the public's perception about the influence, the power that lawyers have?
They think lawyers have far too much influence. They think that they're purposely trying to overclog the courts, they're trying to bring too many cases, they bring unnecessary lawsuits, and they have far too much influence in society. It's interesting, though, that for minorities and women and those who don't have the high income have a better opinion of lawyers, and they think maybe some of them should have more influence.
Stephen?
Alan, in New York State Legislature, everybody thinks the legislators are lawyers. You can count on the fingers of one hand the number of practicing lawyers that sit in the legislature, both in the Senate and the Assembly side. It's a very small portion. Lawyers have influence, and rightly so, where it matters, in the courtroom. They don't bring frivolous lawsuits. A lawyer can't afford to do that. If I'm working for a contingency, I am not going to win and be paid unless my client wins. If that's a frivolous lawsuit, I've wasted a lot of time and a lot of money and I've gone nowhere. And then again, what is a frivolous lawsuit? When the first breast implant case was filed, was that frivolous because it had never been filed before? When the Bjork-Shelley valve, heart valve, these were valves well put in, they were disintegrating.
Yeah,
the
Stephen,
first man that brought that.
Stephen, let me interrupt you. Recently in New Jersey, the government had done some sort of scam where they had filled a bus with, I guess, insurance people or investigators, and they had it hit by another vehicle. And all of a sudden, some of the public was going onto the bus after the accident, or even not being on the bus and giving their names as accident victims. How do you answer that?
Well, I can't answer what the public is going to do. If a lawyer is part of that, that lawyer deserves to be criminally charged and then disciplined.
But it's the whole matter of that litigation is getting out of hand. I think that's the tenor. How do you feel about that, Doreen?
Well, actually, if you look at the real studies, there is that feeling, and it's hard to figure out why it is, because the National Center for States Courts did a survey and a study, and they did a lot of research over it, and they found that there really wasn't any strong evidence of litigation explosion. Per capita, as the population has grown, the number of lawsuits have pretty much kept with that population, and they feel that there's a lot of disinformation out there. There is that perception by the public, and they feel if the other guy's going to get some, I want some.
And who is bringing that disinformation? It's brought by the medical hospital complex and the insurance complexes that are driving the rates up unilaterally to cause these arbitrary crises. When the insurance industry invested millions, billions of dollars nationwide in junk bonds as part of their investment portfolio, and they took a bath on that, what did they do? They immediately turned around and increased the premium rates for their insureds. And they said it's because of the liability insurance crisis. Nonsense. There is none.
Do you feel like this is a public relations thing against lawyers done by...
No, it's not. And if any lawyer walks away from this crisis and feels that it's only a public relations problem, they really should have their head examined. Because what it is, sure, there's a public relations problem, but lawyers do share a blame in bringing some of this public relations problems onto themselves. Shoddy advertising. A lot of states, New York does a better job than most states, but a lot of states do not do a good job in disciplining their own lawyers. Lawyers are constantly getting publicity for having large fees, charging too much, and getting involved in things that they shouldn't be getting involved in. So if lawyers did a better job in policing themselves, controlling their own fees, and also being concerned about the image that they're projecting, that would help.
I give you the power of the legislature. I give you the power of the executive. What would you do to change the system?
It's not for the legislature to do. I think it's for the legal profession to do for themselves. And I don't think that's the last thing the public wants you to do is pass more laws. What they want is that the legal profession to take a look inside of themselves, and Steve here can start the ball rolling, and trying to figure out what is the best way to improve the image of the profession through performance as well.
Alan, let me
Stephen?
suggest this, that Doreen is on the right track. But Doreen's poll was a national poll. I represent only lawyers in New York State.
Yes, but I know
New York
you're,
State is, but New York State
you're a
is
national officer of the American Trial Lawyers Association.
I'm a representative of New York State to the National Board of Governors, but the interesting thing is New York State is light years ahead of many of the other states on attorney discipline, and that's done through the various appellate divisions in the state. The courts discipline the lawyers themselves. We have a very, very strict compliance rules. For example, if a lawyer does something in his private life, nothing to do with his client, and that results in an accusation against him, a criminal accusation against him, and if he's convicted of that accusation, he loses his license. Has nothing to do with relating to clients or embezzling money from the clients, which is a clear violation. But if you do something silly and you falsify your tax return, your personal tax return has nothing to do with the representation of a client. The Bar Association will see to it that you're disciplined by the court, and the chances are, in New York State, that you will lose your license to practice.
But let's suppose that the ABA comes to you and says, okay, you've done a good job in New York. What do you recommend for us to do? Give us a three-point plan as to what you think that we should do.
Good question, Doreen. A three-point plan, I would like to see, and I have I'm going to have difficulty articulating the specifics with regard to advertising because you have a First Amendment problem.
Right.
There's a serious problem. People have a right to say what they want to say.
Yeah, thank God for the First Amendment.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. We wouldn't be here if it were not for the First Amendment. But I would like to
As
see
the media...
I would like to see some guidelines be given as to what is fair comment. I know the appellate courts right now restrict what we can say in certain forms of advertising. I'd like to see more of that. I would like to see attorneys and other professionals, I'd like to see this work for doctors as well, to be covered by mandatory malpractice insurance, so that if there is a loss, someone can recover from that loss. And finally, I'd like to see mandatory continuing legal education. New York is a leader in this. We don't have mandatory continuing legal education, but my association, New York State Trial Lawyers, puts on the average of 25 programs a year for lawyers to sharpen their skills. I'd like to see mandatory medical education. I'd love to see that the doctors' division of professional medical conduct, which is a state operation, I'd like to see them disciplining the doctors. Just today there was a lawsuit filed in this state suing the state of New York and the Office of Professional Medical Conduct for failing to revoke the license of a doctor who ended up murdering one of his patients, having been put on notice that he had destroyed thousands of women in botched abortions, injured countless people. He was finally indicted for murder. And at the same time, the State Board of Professional Medical Conduct was dragging their heels and didn't do anything. If a lawyer had that problem, we would be suspended immediately by our grievance committee and not permitted to practice until the resolution of the case.
I understand and appreciate what you're saying, Steve. But the problem now with this lawyer bashing has reached a level where even in San Francisco, an individual walked into a law firm and shot and killed 6 attorneys. I know the National Law Journal did an extensive article on that.
Yes.
I mean, what is being done? How do you feel about something like that, and how do you prevent it?
Well, part of that was a disgruntled client. Whether he was rightfully disgruntled or not, we will never know at this point. And part of the question that's being dealt with is handgun control, and that's another topic for another show. But there are some things that the public would like to see that would give them an instant signal that the legal profession is serious, and that is whether the profession will impose upon itself mandatory pro bono work, providing free legal services for the community members who cannot afford it and giving access, that would give an instant signal to the public that the legal profession is serious.
How do you feel about mandatory pro bono for your 7,000 members?
Mandatory, anytime the word mandatory is put into something, I have to stop and think about it. But let's look at the pro bono work done by members of our association. I myself have taken on Blue Cross and Blue Shield on behalf of women who are being denied coverage for breast cancer treatment. There are numerous other attorneys in the association that will voluntarily step in and represent downtrodden people.
I understand that, but those are individuals, and those are maybe a hit-and-miss situation where an attorney he or her decides to do it. But what about this mandatory where an attorney must give time out of their daily work schedule to the poor, to the people, to causes on a mandatory basis?
I think it's a wonderful idea, but when you mandate someone to do something, that's a bit oppressive in a free society. I would strongly urge it. I would advocate for it. I would support any of my members and organize my members. We do it through the association. But to force someone to give up their time, what about the lawyers that work for the government? They're lawyers also. Are they going to be required to go out and do that? The lawyers don't get paid huge fees, the consumer advocates. When we represent poor people in a contingency fee case, most of this goes down the tubes. We're doing pro bono work when we lose a case.
I have to tell you, being a former governmental lawyer myself, you consider it pro bono in public service when you're only making maybe 1/10 or 1/5 of what an attorney in private practice makes. So in essence, by taking on that job, you are doing a little bit of pro bono.
Well, but what about all the other attorneys? Many of the large law firms, the big commercial law firms, volunteer and do pro bono work, and that's fine if they're able to do it. But to ask someone who may not be making a substantial amount of money, the study didn't show what the median income of attorneys are.
Well, maybe that should be the threshold. Maybe you've just offered a solution on how
That
to
might be a very
do
good
it.
idea.
Once they make an X amount of money, because they have to file income taxes anyway, they have to register and so forth, maybe that's a solution.
I know you've done a survey on the median income of attorneys. What is the median income of attorneys?
Well,
Approximately.
I really don't have the answer because there's so many different categories that, you know, if you put in the same category as this very successful gentleman right here,
Right.
with someone who's working for the ACLU, it's not really a very meaningful number.
Do lawyers, the median, earn over $100,000?
Many of them do, but I guess I don't have a meaningful number for you.
Stephen, in the 1 minute that we have left, what do you want to say to the public about lawyer bashing?
Lawyer bashing, look, flattery is great. And when people are sniping at you, maybe it's the highest form of flattery. We're out there, we're doing our job. If we're not muckraking, if we're not digging up, if we're not poking the establishment, we're not doing our job. It's not the people that are criticizing us. It's the establishment that criticizes us. It is the manufacturers of drugs that poison our insides. It's the manufacturer of toys that kill our babies. Those are the ones that don't like us.
Doreen, in summation?
In summation, lawyers are going to have to get their act together and try to figure out how to answer this problem because they're the only ones who can fix it.
Doreen Weisenhouse, thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. And Steve
pleasure.
Peshkin, thank you very much
Alan,
for appearing on
my pleasure.
Lawline. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zollman and Schnorman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law, located at 63 Wall Street in New York City.